You want me to put that on my Tudor?
Harry's wife. 2 broken families. How does she feel? You may have seen a small piece of video footage which shows Harry's wife's arrival at the Women of Vision Bought Awards ceremony, where, glamorously, she turns up at a Hertz rental reception. A voice yells out, above the general hubbub of the crowd, "Harry's wife, how does it feel to come from 2 broken families?" The voice is clear and distinct. You can hear it above everything else, and Harry's wife will have heard it. What will that have done to her in the moment? Well, it would have amounted to challenge fuel. The tertiary source, presumably a journalist, or it could be a passerby, but I think on balance it's more likely to be a journalist, issues a comment towards her. Therefore, he's talking to her, using words about her, tone about her. He's directed towards her, although she's not looking at him. Therefore, she doesn't see his facial expression, the look in his eyes, his body language. She just hears the words and the tone associated with them. It's coming from a tertiary source. So there is the provision of fuel, albeit it's not a large amount of fuel, and it isn't particularly potent either. But it does amount to a challenge, because it's suggesting to her that she has some form of culpability involved in these 2 broken families. It's not said in a sympathetic way, such as, "It must be difficult for you. How does it feel to come from 2 broken families?" But rather the insinuation is, how do you feel about the fact that you have 2 broken families that you have fuck all to do with? Naturally, her narcissism, because of the existence of her facade, isn't going to cause her to turn around, to charge back out of the Hertz reception rental area, find the offending individual who asked her this question, and punch them on the nose. The facade just will not let that happen. So that direct assertion of control goes out of the window. She can't in the moment turn to anybody and say, "Typical paparazzi scum asking me meaningless questions," for old Ginger Bollocks to go, "Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right, my little pumpkin." And thus that gives her the subconscious sense of control that she would crave over that relevant journalist. Instead, she just dismisses the individual. It's like she's getting jabbed with a hot poker. So there is a momentary sense of discomfort for her when this person issues the challenge fuel, but her narcissism jumps in and swats it away as she just focuses on doing her best briefcase girl pose and sashaying through the reception at Hertz rental. Thus, that's how she deals with such a question being posed. She doesn't consciously do it. She doesn't think to herself, "Oh, this is a threat to my control, I'm going to jettison it." But it is an instinctive, knee-jerk self-defense mechanism of her narcissism. It has to be that way because it has to operate quickly. It can't wait for that empty space between her ears to crank into action. What about the assertion that was made? And let us address, how does she feel about the fact that she's from 2 broken families? The simple fact is, she does not care. If she were ever to consent to being interviewed about this, she would, and that's a big if, because likely, as a combination of PR advice and her narcissism, she would retreat from any suggestion of being asked the difficult questions. The narcissism would basically say you don't need to answer those things, and therefore she would never consent to giving an interview where she would be asked. That's why all of her interviews are carefully controlled as to what she's being asked, and they're basically just PR exercises. But if, in an alternate universe, she consented to be asked that question, she would basically make noises that make her seem like she's compassionate and sympathetic whilst blame-shifting. So what she would do is say, "I wish it could have turned out more different to how it has been, that I'm sad about what has happened with my father, but ultimately I had to protect myself. thus blame shifting onto her father and her half-siblings, whilst doling out a pity play, probably making noises, "I'm so grateful that I have a good relationship with my mother." In other words, my mother is under my control. Then with regard to the royal family, she would say, "Well, I tried my best to make it work, but they just weren't amenable to doing so. And unfortunately, it has reached a place whereby it's better for Harry, or H as you probably call him, and me, to remain where we are and seek an independent life." Thus suggesting that there's something wrong with the royal family. She will never, ever accept accountability for the fact that she's the one that has caused the break in both of these families. She's the one that disengaged from her half-siblings and her father, for reasons which I've explained to you in parts passing. She caused that to happen. She has shelved many members of the royal family and disengaged from some. Again, this is her doing as part of her narcissism, whereby she has no need for the involvement with certain members of the royal family, so they've been popped back on the shelf. And with others, her narcissism has deemed that they should be disengaged from, so that there's no means that they can communicate with her. Of course, this could all change in an instant if her narcissism deemed that it would be a good move to, for instance, reconcile with her father or to appear at some kind of royal event. But at the current time, as we saw with the coronation, her narcissism perceives that she will be given a frosty and largely silent reception, not only by the royal family, but by the British public and the British media, and therefore it caused her to stay away. There's no sense of guilt on her part about what she's done to both of these families. There's no sense of remorse. I doubt that even though a middle mid-ranger such as her, who is capable of false contrition, would exhibit it. What she would do is that classic non-apology of, "I feel bad for the situation. If only it could have been different." And then move on to blame other people for the situation, suggesting it's the fault of the Markles and the Windsors that have put her in the place that she finds herself. The question, of course, was done to prick her conscience, but it won't work because she doesn't have one. What it does do is prick her need for control, albeit temporary and momentarily. She dismisses it, and like any narcissist, the thought doesn't linger. She doesn't then sit inside, ruminating on what's been said. She's in the next moment. Her narcissism dealt with it and it's jettisoned. And she's on to the next thing, dealing with the next assertion of control or potential threat to her control, and thus she rolls along. But how does she feel about the two broken families? She doesn't feel anything. The only thing that she will feel is that such a question is impertinent, unnecessary, and subconsciously a threat to her need for control. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.